Good Dinosaur was really not good.
Yeah.
It was Bad Dinosaur.
I was waiting for it. I could see it in your eyes.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name's Tyler Hunt, and I am here with my co-host, like always, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, man?
I'm good. It kind of feels good to be back the way things should be. Last week, obviously, we talked about this a little bit, that you were out of town training for your new job, and so we had to do it over Skype. Hopefully the audio wasn't too bad. Tried to clean it up a little bit, but you could definitely tell that you were on Skype, and it just feels good to be back in the room with you again.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be in this situation. It wasn't fun sitting in a dark hotel room
by yourself.
I felt like I was a crazy person carrying the mic to and from the hotel room.
Oh, yeah.
Like I was getting looks.
Oh, yeah.
Either that, one, they mistakenly thought I was important and I needed to record something. Or,
well, you are important.
Or two, that I was like filming a porno in my hotel room. It was like, because I mean, it could kind of be mistaken as a boom, I guess, if you don't know equipment. So,
yeah. No, I got that because, I mean, it was a while back. I think it was when we reviewed XMen Apocalypse. I was actually in Ohio for my cousin's wedding at the time, and I had to do the exact same thing, and I got some really weird looks. I think my uncle asked me, he's like, "You doing stand-up or something?" And I was like, "No, man, I'm just recording the podcast." He's like, "Oh, okay, that makes more sense." I was like, "You just think I'm doing a show in my hotel room?" Like, he's kind of a weird guy. But I got very similar looks, and we get the same looks when we're going to and from Indie PopCon, like from the hotel and stuff, because we're carrying all our equipment and stuff like that. So
yeah, but I left it in the hotel room the whole week, so I'm sure the maid service like thought something weird was going on as well. So yeah, definitely.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing your porno.
It's just me jerking off, man. It's pretty boring.
So, again, really looking forward to seeing your porno. Anyways, now that we've made this super, super awkward and we've lost any new listeners that we could have gotten.
Yeah. No, who is it? Stanley always says like every comic is somebody's first, like every podcast episode is somebody's first. And we don't. Which is super weird because we're going to be reviewing Cars 3. So we might have gotten some younger listeners. We no longer have those young listeners anymore. I can promise you that any other podcast that reviewed Cars 3 this week did not also talk about jerking off.
So we're the only ones. So you're welcome.
If you were looking for an explicit Cars 3 review, you came to the right place.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really weird niche. Anyways, we normally start each podcast off by kind of just checking in with each other. We're very, very busy, and so we don't get to have the nerdy conversations that we used to have before we got our big boy jobs. So, Tyler, what are you into this week?
So I am going to talk about Oh Hello on Broadway, which is a new Netflix, I guess special, but it's basically a taped performance of an Oh Hello. I'll get into what it is, but it's basically from Nick Kroll and Rob Delaney. So I'm going to be
Rob Delaney, John Mulaney.
Oh, fuck. That's how much I like this. But John Mulaney, my bad. So I'm going to be transparent here. This isn't normally something that I would talk about in this segment. I usually try to go for something more relevant or good, but I just consume so much less entertainment than I typically do this past week because I was so busy with work that really it's the only thing I watched and the only thing I can talk about. So for those who aren't aware of what this is, like me, going into it completely blind, Oh Hello is basically, it's comprised of two characters. It's Gil Faison and George St. Geegland, I guess, played by Nick Kroll and John Delaney. I even wrote Rob Delaney.
It's here. John Mulaney.
It's John Mulaney?
Yes.
And I'm saying Delaney?
I didn't hear you say it the first time. All I heard was Rob, and I blacked out. But yeah, it's John Mulaney.
God damn. Man.
You know you don't like something when you don't pronounce the names right, and I have to correct you.
No. So basically, apparently this was part of Kroll show whenever it was on Comedy Central. But I guess it wasn't just like characters for that show. They had been doing it as comedians before that. So all of that being said, again, obviously I'm not too incredibly familiar with the characters going into this special, and that might be why I disliked it so much. So when it started out, I kind of found the characters somewhat funny, but that quickly faded as the special went on. It seems like they're probably better in smaller doses because it's the same jokes over and over, and it didn't seem very Broadway worthy to me. So basically they play these characters that they're playing are older guys, and they're from New York, and they have that accent, and they basically tell dad jokes, and it gets annoying really quick. And it's a shame because I really do respect how much effort you have to probably put into a show like this. So from that standpoint, I do appreciate the show because of how much work it takes to create an hour and 45-minute show that's comprised mostly of jokes and stage direction. All that being said, I think that Kroll and John Mulaney, right, could have put their creative forces into something different that works better in this setting. Instead, you end up with this, which is almost unbearable to watch by the end of it. It definitely suffers just from repetition. It was pretty bad. I don't know that I laughed at all after the first 10 minutes because it was the same joke over and over. So I would avoid this. I'm not a big Broadway guy. I think the only Broadway show I've ever seen wasn't even on Broadway. It was in Indy, but it was Book of Mormon. And, you know, that's a pretty high bar. And knowing that there are other shows like that in Hamilton that are on Broadway, I'm just surprised that, one, this show made it to Broadway, and two, that they thought, man, this is good enough for a Netflix special. So I would avoid it. There's much better things to watch on Netflix from a comedy standpoint. So not good.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Nick Kroll fan. I just never really liked the Kroll show. I just don't like his characters that much. I liked him on The League because I thought his character on there was pretty funny, but that show got old pretty quickly. It was it was the same joke over and over again. I just didn't really like it. And they kind of got away from fantasy football, which is one of the reasons I was watching it. So other than that, I'm not a huge fan of his work. I do like John Mulaney quite a lot. His stand-up is pretty funny. So I was somewhat interested in this just because of him. And I know my wife's been meaning to watch it as well. But now that you have said what you said, it kind of gives me an excuse not to watch it because there's so much other stuff out there that I want to watch. And it's not something that I obviously was clamoring for to begin with. So I probably will just skip this one.
Yeah, I would. It has like cameos from Matthew Broderick and Steve Martin.
Okay, that's cool.
And that's kind of a highlight. But again, it's just not worth it. So
cool, man.
What are you into?
Well, I have been watching The Flash for the last couple of weeks, which of course is part of the DC TV universe alongside of Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow and Supergirl and all that good stuff. And I think it was a couple of years ago on an episode, I talked about how I was watching the first season of Arrow. Unfortunately, I only got through like maybe a quarter of the first season. I really just did not like that show that much. It really kind of turned into a soap opera that happens to be featuring a superhero.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There is drama in The Flash. There's definitely a lot of characters, and it's a TV show, so there's a lot of different drama, but it just feels like the drama in The Flash is a lot more natural to the actual characters than in Arrow. Arrow's drama feels very artificial, and like I said, it feels like a soap opera that happens to have a superhero in it. So because of that, I kind of stayed away from The Flash for a while because I just didn't like Arrow, and I'm really kind of disappointed that I stayed away from the show for so long. I really kind of only got into it because I really like the comic book that's currently out, The Flash. I talked about that. Once Rebirth started, I wanted to pick up a new non-Batman DC book, and I had heard some good things about The Flash, so I read his Rebirth title, and I've kind of stuck with it so far. really, really enjoying that book. And so I'm glad that I started watching the show. I think this show definitely has the benefit of not having to carry the weight of creating this universe. Like they do kind of introduce some characters that end up going on to Legends of Tomorrow. So there is some universe building in this show, but because Arrow had already come out before it and they had a couple of seasons, I think, before the Flash even started. So there was already some universe building in Arrow. So I appreciated that. He does come into the show every once in a while. There are a few team up episodes in this show, so I kind of wish that I had stuck with Arrow, but at the same time that show felt like homework because we love superheroes so much. It feels like you almost have to, as a nerd, watch all of these shows that come out, but the show just wasn't interesting to me. So I, on one side, wish I had stuck with it because I do really like The Flash, and there are some stuff in there that I'm like, oh, I think I would have liked this episode more if I had stuck with Arrow. But at the other side, it's just like, well, it was just a shitty show, so I'm not going to watch it. But yeah, as a character as a whole, I kind of wish that I had gotten to The Flash earlier than just this past year, because I really, really like it. Like, I think it was just the time travel and the fact that I feel like the character itself is just kind of one note. At least I thought that before I got into it. Just feels like it's like that first idea. Like, what are we going to give this guy? Oh, well, he can just run real fast. Okay, that's the concept, and they just went with it. And there's so much more to the character than just that. So I really kind of wish I had gotten into it before this past year. I will say, as far as the show, to say a small negative with it is the fact that there's a lot of what I call comic book science in this show, and I kind of roll my eyes a lot because there's a part in almost every single episode that you just kind of have to shut your brain off, because it's just like they do in comic books. Is they have to explain certain things, and those things aren't possible. They're not humanly possible to do, but they have to find some way to explain it. So they just use a lot of science sounding words.
Yeah.
And string them in a row and hope that people just check out. And I'm not good at science at all, but even I know that that's not possible. So it's frustrating because I know it's not possible, but I don't know enough about it to know why it's not possible. I just know that it's not. So it's just kind of like, oh, I check out for those 30 seconds, which is exactly what they want you to do, because they don't want anybody to notice that they're just bullshitting you. But that's all comic book science is just them stringing together a bunch of science sounding words. So that's really frustrating. And again, I kind of just check out, but there's a lot of that in this show. But other than that, I really think the characters are really interesting. I love the character of the Flash, and I think that they expand the universe really well in this show. Like, they don't shove it down your throat like they kind of do in the DC extended universe, the movies. I feel like they shove that shit down your throat in those movies, and they're a lot more subtle with it in the TV show.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I have not watched The Flash because I felt like I needed to watch Arrow first, and I need to get over that hump because I've heard such amazing things about this show. But I'm just, the nerdy side of me that's a completionist.
Sure.
I feel like I have to be completely caught up with the entire storyline of this DC TV universe. So that includes Arrow and Flash, and now it's going to include Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow. So it's a daunting mountain of content, but I do want to really watch that stuff because I feel like a bad nerd, especially a guy who likes DC, not watching this stuff.
Yeah, and it's also tough because they're all a couple of seasons in, and they're all an hour long. Well, I mean, on Netflix it's like 40-some minutes long, but they're 20 plus episodes a season. Like, I'm at season 2, and I'm actually on the Kevin Smith episode.
Oh yeah.
Runaway Dinosaurs, I think what it's called, and it's episode 21. I just started it last night, but I was kind of having a hard time keeping my eyes open. Not because it's boring, just because I was getting tired. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So
I turned it off, and I'm going to rewatch it. I think I got like 10 minutes into it, so I'm going to rewatch it sometime today. So I'll probably be done with the second season by the end of today, and then I'll be obviously moving on to the third season, which just finished not too long ago, which is pretty cool with Netflix, is that they've been getting these shows on Netflix pretty quickly. Like as far as the turnover is concerned, like I know Supergirl just ended. I think the second season of that just ended, and it's already on Netflix as well.
That's pretty awesome. I guess the CW just needs all of this. What would it be? Support or
publicity.
Publicity. That's a good word that they need. So like, just put it on Netflix. Maybe people will like it and watch it whenever we have advertisers sponsoring it. So
I'm just going to watch it on Netflix. I'm not going to watch the CW.
I don't blame you.
All right. So our next segment is just plainly called comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics. I'm guessing he didn't read a ton this week because he was busy, but we like to spot like one or two an episode. So what'd you read this week?
I had to read the one that I'm going to talk about because it is leading up to something I'm very excited for, the Dark Knight's Metal. So they're putting out the prequel comics like they tend to do for these big event storylines. So the first of a couple prelude comics came out this week. It's called Dark Days, The Forge. It's written by Scott Snyder and James Tynion. And then the art was done by Jim Lee, John Romita Jr., and Andy Kubert. So obviously a lot of talent involved there. I mean, everybody knows Scott Snyder at this point. James Tynion is writing Detective Comics right now. And then, I mean, Jim Lee's a legend, and John Romita Jr. is okay. And I don't know much about Andy Kubert, but I've heard his name before. So I know that his work is out there. So like I said, a lot of talent. And for a prelude comic, there is a ton going on in this issue. It's basically 3 different threads. There's a Batman thread, a Green Lantern / Duke Thomas thread, and then a small Hawkman storyline as well. So I'm going to start with the Hawkman storyline just because it's only a few pages. And I'll be honest, I really don't know much about that character. Like, I remember him from Kingdom Come, and he pops up here and there in some of the stuff I've read, but I don't know much about his backstory, his powers, anything like that. So I was kind of lost during his portion of the story, which, like I said, it is the briefest of the 3. He's basically flashing back to a starship like crashing in ancient Egypt. And I'm not really sure how that's going to play into the rest of the narrative. I'm not sure how that plays into his character at all. So it's something I'm going to need to brush up on. But, right off the bat, I was kind of lost on this comic. So it had to get me back with the other storylines.
Sure.
So from there, it shifts to Batman. And it follows just an action piece where he's escaping with a scientist from a volcano in the Bermuda Triangle, which is about the most comic book thing you could possibly ever say.
Yeah, so, for sure.
It's a pretty cool piece that sees some cool new bat armor, and I don't know what the name of it is going to be, but of course the art is amazing. And Batman's basically on a mission, and I'm kind of lost as to what his purpose is in the mission. But I think that's kind of the point. I think it's going to explore it more whenever you get to Dark Days or Dark Knight's Metal. There's some cool character moments with him, especially a point where he goes to the Fortress of Solitude and basically knocks on the door, and Superman answers. And he's like, hey, that secret room I asked you to put under the Fortress of Solitude? I need in it. And so apparently Batman has a basement in the Fortress of Solitude, which is kind of weird, but kind of funny as well. The big storyline of this comic, you would think it belonged to Batman, but to me, it belongs to Green Lantern and Duke Thomas. If you're not familiar with Duke Thomas, he's kind of the new protege that Batman's brought on. He doesn't have a codename or anything, and him and Green Lantern kind of go back and forth about that, joking about it. But he's basically, I don't want to say the new Robin because Damian Wayne is still in the picture, but he's just kind of somebody that Batman's taken under his wing, pun intended. So there's not only witty and fun dialogue between those two, but there's a ton of tension and surprises in their story that I won't get into. So basically, Green Lantern is sent by the Guardians to the Batcave to investigate a secret room Batman has underneath it. Again, I don't know, a basement to the Batcave. And there's some tension between the two, and then there's a big reveal at the end of the comic. So all in all, this issue is packed with a ton of info, almost too much, some would say. And there's a ton of deep cut references and Easter eggs, which some I liked, some I didn't. So it's hard for me to grasp some of it because even though I love DC, I'm not as well versed in DC lore as I am with Marvel, but I appreciate the care that they would put into the prelude issue that could have been just, a throwaway moneymaker, like leading up to August. So I would definitely say read it if you plan on reading Dark Knight's Metal, because there is some big stuff that happens there. But I don't know. I know that you're not the big DC guy, so you might be lost a little bit like I was.
Yeah, I didn't really plan on reading this book. I do plan on reading the new Batman book. But, I don't know. It just it feels like a zero issue.
Yeah.
To a book that I am excited for, but in a universe that I don't really care that much about. So
I'd imagine I guess the whole thing with it is it's kind of, and I feel like we've seen this story before, but it's like Batman's hiding something, and everybody is curious what Batman's hiding. And
there's just no way he's hiding this much shit.
Well, even if let's say he's hiding it, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what's going on with Batman? Could it be that he's up to something that's not good?" Like, we've seen that before, and it always turns out that Batman had all of the shit together, and he had this elaborate plan, and I'm sure that's what's going to happen with this storyline. But I guess it's just, the journey, not the conclusion. So. Anyways, man, what'd you read?
I read a pretty big book in Marvel, actually. It just came out this past Wednesday. It's Defenders #1. Obviously, they put this out before the Netflix series of the same name comes out in August. I wasn't quite sure what to make of this book. I don't like Daredevil as much as you do. It's a solid book. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of hit or miss for me. And I know that you love it a lot. I don't read Jessica Jones. Power Man and Iron Fist has kind of gone to shit since Civil War II, so I wasn't quite sure if I was going to like this book. Speaking of Civil War II, this book is written by Michael Bendis, who also wrote that event.
Yep.
So I was a little bit anxious to see what he had in store. Of course, this book follows Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and Iron Fist as they are simultaneously attacked by a villain they thought was dead. I liked this book a hell of a lot more than I liked Civil War II. First thing that kind of jumps out at you is the artwork. It really just kind of jumps off the page. It's just fucking phenomenal. They set up and teased a lot in this book, like you would expect from a #1, but the action was just really well paced, enough to kind of keep you entertained while they kind of introduced all of what was going on. The dialogue, even though I am, again, not a fan of Civil War II, I was kind of impressed with Bendis' dialogue just between the two characters. The dialogue was pretty fun. All in all, this is a really fun book, and I'm trying to be kind of short with it because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's definitely a book that I am excited about. I didn't think I was going to say that going in because, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of these characters they're separate books, even though Daredevil is a good book. Power Man and Iron Fist started off really strong, but hasn't really been good the last couple of months. But it's definitely a book that I'm excited to read more of.
Yeah, this might be one I didn't pick up because at this point, and we talk about it all the time, I'm always hesitant to add new comics to my revolving Wednesday pickups, but I don't know. I might go back and pick this one up because you make it sound like it's good. And I was kind of on the fence that, maybe it's just a cash in for the Defender show coming out, but it sounds like it's more than that. So
yeah, I don't know how much the story that they're introducing right now is going to play a part in the Defenders, the Netflix series, because it's going to probably be somewhat similar in tone, I would think. But as far as the story is concerned, the villain that gets introduced that they thought was dead probably isn't going to play a part in the actual series itself. So I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. But like I said, the tone should be about the same as you would expect. But yeah, I doubt the story is going to follow too closely.
Cool.
All right, so you ready for some nerd news?
Yeah, so every week we do our nerd news segment where we talk about some big nerd headlines that have come up since the last time we spoke. The big one this week, in my opinion, involved the next XMen movie. So
okay.
We'll start off with that. It's been confirmed that the next X-Men film is going to be Dark Phoenix.
Okay.
So something that they swung and missed at once already, but Bryan Singer will not be back to direct. He's probably soliciting little boys somewhere.
Yes, for sure, allegedly.
So instead, it's going to be directed by Simon Kinberg, who produced the movies for a while now. And
doesn't he help write some of them?
Yeah, he wrote shit. I can't remember. But this is his. I think he helped write some of them, but this is his directorial debut. So
okay.
They're handing him a lot.
Yeah, I really wish that there was a database maybe on the internet that would tell us all this information.
Yeah, I mean, you have a iPad in front of you too, man. Why do I always have to be the fucking research
because you're the one that didn't know.
I don't want to be the research monkey, man. But let's see. Anyways, what's interesting is it was kind of up in the air if most of the stars from the First Class trilogy would be back because their contracts are up, and it turns out all of them are coming back. So the one absence in the casting list that they sent out was Evan Peters wasn't on there, which is a bit disappointing because Quicksilver's been a cool character in the 2 films that he showed up in. But everybody else is coming back, including Jennifer Lawrence, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, basically everyone that's too good for these movies at this point. So
for sure.
I don't know. I hope they get it right, but like, are they grasping at straws now? We're doing Dark Phoenix again.
I think it's a mistake because for 2 reasons. The Last Stand, they already tried it.
Yeah.
And it was garbage. And Bryan Singer also didn't do The Last Stand. So I feel like they're just making the same mistake again. They're trying to do that same concept that they swung and missed at without Bryan Singer again. I feel like it's a mistake for sure. But I mean, Age of Apocalypse wasn't good either. And, it wasn't Age of Apocalypse. It was just Apocalypse.
Yeah.
But that wasn't good either, and Bryan Singer did that. So, I mean, it's not like he's the end-all, be-all as far as the X-Men universe is concerned. But
all right. So normally I wouldn't spend too much time on Simon Kinberg's filmography, but I want to give you a rundown of the movies he's wrote.
Okay.
Because there's no way this is going to be good. So we have XXX State of the Union.
Solid.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith. X-Men The Last Stand. Jumper. The first Sherlock Holmes he did the screenplay for. This Means War. He was involved with the screenplay for X-Men Days of Future Past. He was involved with the screenplay for Fantastic Four, the bad 2015.
You don't have to say the bad one. They're all bad.
Like the worst one. That's a good point. I don't know why I needed to differentiate there. But basically, that's a rundown of the movies he's been involved with the screenplay on. So
yeah, just a pile of garbage right there.
Yeah, so I personally do not have high hopes for this movie. I hope that I want everything to be great, but we'll see.
Yeah, I doubt it's going to be good.
All right, so this next story I'm bringing up because I know you're a big fan of the game. They are putting together a Little Nightmares TV show, and it's being adapted by the Russo brothers, who, of course, are known for Captain America, Winter Soldier, Civil War, and then they're doing Infinity War as well. So I don't know anything about the game, but I know it's something that you really enjoyed, and you have your little figure up there. Yep. So do you think that this story translates to a TV show?
No, I don't. I'm excited for it because I think it could be really cool, and there's not enough of this kind of television on television, but I don't know how they're necessarily going to do it because the game is fun, but there's not a ton of story. And obviously with TV shows, there has to be story. So I don't know how they're going to do it, how they're going to take that really cool concept and just give it mythology. And I don't know if you kind of taint it by doing that because there's almost none of that. Like you just kind of get thrown into this world and nothing is really explained to you. And it's really weird, but very, very cool type of weird. And I actually was just talking to you about how I wanted to play the hardest difficulty. So, you know, I really enjoyed a video game when I'm willing to go through and replay it when there's so much other stuff that I want to play. So I really enjoy this game quite a lot. It's not a very long game either. So I don't know how they're going to do the TV series because there's not a ton of story and I think it only took me about 6 hours or so to play the whole story. So there's really not a ton with the mythology at all, really.
Yeah, I want to go play this game, to be honest. So I might put this into my list of things to do because you make it sound fun. But I mean, I trust the Russo brothers, and that's all I can go off of because I don't know the story. So I don't know. I'll watch it.
I'll be surprised if it gets made, to be honest with you. There's so much stuff that gets pitched that we never ever see. So
yeah, I know the Russo. You and I were talking about Sex Castle a little bit before we started recording. And I know the Workaholics guys optioned that for a movie or a TV show or something. And the Russo brothers were involved with that as well. So it seems like they have a lot of, what's the term? Like things in the fire. What's the term?
I don't know.
They got a lot of shit going on. So
yeah.
It's not like they're making the biggest Marvel movie of all time right now either. So, all right. Let's see. John Wick 2. Or nope, not John Wick 2. John Wick TV show.
Yes.
They're making a John Wick TV show. It's going to be called The Continental, which of course plays a big part in those movies. And it's going to be a prequel TV show to the movies because obviously shit hits the fan kind of in that universe with those films. And Keanu Reeves will most likely cameo at some point. So I really like the John Wick movies quite a bit. We've talked about them a couple times on the podcast. The second one just came out on Blu-ray. So I'm all for exploring this universe more because I think that they created something kind of cool with these films.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I really, really enjoy these movies. We talked pretty favorably about John Wick Chapter 2, and I actually just recently rewatched it, and I think I want to like it more the second time. Like, it's very rare that I like a movie more than I liked it the first time.
Yeah.
I just think I don't know what I expected when we saw it in the theaters, but now that I know what it is, I really appreciate it more and more. Like, I love the mythology around John Wick, which sounds like that's all this show's going to be. So I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember saying, because I think you did it for what we were into that episode because we reviewed Lego Batman. They came out on the same weekend. And as much as I like Lego Batman, I think I like John Wick 2 more.
I actually had a similar experience with Lego Batman because I just watched it this past week. I actually watched both of them this past week, and I like Lego Batman and I like John Wick Chapter 2 more than I did the first time I saw them.
Yeah, I'm excited. I pre-ordered Lego Batman. I got the Steelbook from Best Buy, and it was waiting for me when I got home from Dayton. And my wife didn't get to go see it with us, and she really wants to watch it. So I think we're going to watch it tonight. So I'm excited to revisit it.
Yeah, it's a lot funnier than I remember it being. Like, I was laughing a lot more than I remember in the theater when we were watching it the other night.
I bought the song from that movie, I Am the Batman or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever I shuffle all my songs, it'll come up periodically, and that song is just so brilliant. So I'm excited to watch it again.
For sure.
For Nerd News, that's all I had. I know there were a few E3 things that popped up after we recorded our last episode. I know that you were pretty impressed with the Nintendo presentation, so I'm going to throw it to you about anything you want to talk about E3.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about E3 a little bit the last episode. We talked about the Xbox One X, which we both kind of agreed sounds really cool, but it's not something that we're going to necessarily get right away. And we talked about Madden 18, the long shot, which I recently just found out some more news about that. You won't actually play professional football in that story mode, which dampers my enthusiasm for that a little bit. Yeah, you're just going to be an amateur trying to build your way up to draft day, but then you don't actually get to play in the NFL with that character, which is really stupid.
Yeah, I don't get that. That's weird.
I don't know. I don't know if it's their answer because I've talked about this before with NBA 2K. Is you do all the pre-draft stuff and then you get drafted, which is cool. But then the team that you get drafted, they actually drafted a real person with that spot, so that person's still on your team. So basically, your team gets 2 first-round draft picks that year. So I don't know if that's their way of justifying that or like fixing that problem, because it would be the same way with Madden. If you got drafted, a real person got drafted with that spot as well. So I don't know if that's their way of kind of rectifying that or not, but it's very disappointing because I wanted it to be exactly like my career. Even though I kind of trashed it for being that, I really wanted it to be that. So I'm a little less excited for that than I was previously, but it's still pretty cool. And I think we talked about Battlefront 2 as well. But Nintendo had their presentation the other day, a couple of days after we recorded, and they just kind of blew away all the competition. They have so many different really cool franchises, and they have this really cool new product with the Switch, and they just kind of blew everybody away with all the stuff that they announced that they were going to put out for the Switch, among other of their systems. So there's going to be a new Kirby game coming to the Switch in 2018. Kirby's not something that I play religiously, but it is a fun character. They are fun games. So I'm definitely excited to check that out. Metroid 4 Prime is coming to the 3DS, which is not a franchise that I'm hugely familiar with. I only played a little bit here and there with that, so I'm not like super excited for it, but I know it was a big deal when they announced it. A new Yoshi game is coming in 2018 to the Switch, which I'm super excited for. Yoshi is a very, very cool character. I loved playing him on the Mario games. I love playing him on Mario Kart and Super Smash Brothers and so on and so forth. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. And it looks really cool. Some of the gameplay that I've seen from them or from this game looks really cool. We're getting Breath of the Wild DLC is coming actually next week. So I'm really looking forward to that. I love that game, but now that I kind of feel like I finished it, I haven't really revisited it much since I played the story. So I'm definitely looking forward to picking up that DLC. I think that's June 30th is when it comes out. Rocket League, which is not a game that I played, but I've heard really, really good things about. Apparently it's super, super fun. Yeah. It's coming to the Switch soon. Holiday 2017 is what they're saying that it's coming out. And they released some gameplay from Super Mario Odyssey, which looks super, super weird, but also really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. That comes out in October. So those are the big things as far as I'm concerned coming out for the Switch, among other things, for Nintendo. And they announced all of that stuff at E3, and they just kind of blew everybody away.
Yeah, I could see myself getting a Switch. Like, once I'm settled in my new job and back on a routine, I think that this is something that I'd want to get because there's so many good games coming out, and I know how much fun you've had with it, and it's something that I want to get back into. So I foresee myself being a part of some of this at some point. So
yeah, the thought of having a Kirby, Yoshi, and then Super Mario Odyssey, and I already have Zelda, I already have Mario Kart. I just bought Binding of Isaac, which is a game that I never played. It was kind of a re-release on the Switch. I never played it, but it's pretty cool. It's super, super weird, but it's really cool. My sister actually got me like a Mario eShop gift card for my birthday when I was in Vegas, and so I bought that game on the Switch, and it's been pretty cool. My wife hates it, but I like it quite a lot so far.
Cool.
All right, so I guess you threw it to me, so that means you're done with nerd news.
It for nerd news.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called the main topic. It changes from episode to episode. Like we mentioned before, we're going to be reviewing Cars 3, which is directed by Brian Free. This is actually his first directorial effort, but he's kind of a Pixar company man. He's been in the art department for them for years now. This movie obviously centers around Lightning McQueen, who is slowed down by age, but is still determined to prove he can compete in a sport dominated by a new generation of racers. I was pretty conflicted going into this film. On one hand, I love animated films. We've talked about this a ton. You're a Disney nerd. I just love the genre in itself. And I love Pixar so much. But on the other hand, I really don't like the Cars franchise. It feels like it's easily the worst Pixar franchise. A lot of times I forget that it's even Pixar because it really doesn't feel like the first two films really don't feel like Pixar films, especially the second one, which is just fucking hot garbage. But I wanted to be excited because it's a Pixar film, but I also kind of kept my expectations in check going into this movie.
Yeah, so I remember when the first Cars came out, it was when I was working at the movie theater, and I didn't hate it. Like I thought that, it was fine. I never bothered with the second Cars, if I'm being honest, and I think that's saying something because you know how big of a Disney nerd I am, and I've seen everything and love everything, but I have no interest in watching that movie, and I was going to watch it before we saw this one so that I'd be caught up, but I just Wikipedia'd it, man, because I've heard such bad things, and I really don't want to watch a movie about Mater being a secret spy or whatever it is. So that does sound like hot garbage. But going into this movie, I had read some good reviews and I kind of got my hopes up a little bit, but we'll get into it. I for whatever reason, I can wrap my mind around talking toys and monster universes and, talking animals, but I can't, for whatever reason, wrap my mind around talking cars. So
yeah, so let's just jump right into Broad Strokes, which of course is our first segment. We break up our reviews into all these different segments, and the first one is just kind of a general overview, which we call Broad Strokes. And I feel like I was right to keep my expectations in check for this movie. even though it feels like the most Pixar version of the Cars movies, it falls really short of the high standards set by the studio. I really liked the more mature story that it tried to tell, especially considering the first two films. I don't necessarily know how it's going to play with the kids, because this is probably the most kid-friendly franchise that Pixar has, even though, like you said, there's talking toys, but even those stories are much more grown-up type of story. So this feels like, as far as the stories are concerned, even though the third one was more mature, this franchise seems like it's more geared towards kids than anything else. The story, which we'll get into in more length here in a little bit, was super, super predictable. I feel like if you've seen any sports movie ever, you've seen this movie. It is The Godfather compared to the second Cars film, so I will give it that. Certainly a lot better than that movie. Like, it's one of the only Pixar movies that I have not watched start to finish. Like, I own the goddamn thing and I can't watch it. It's so bad. Like, I think I've gotten like 75% of the way through and I just tapped out. I was like, I can't watch any more of this garbage. So it's definitely a huge step up from the second film, but it is the second week in a row that I have to admit that I had a hard time keeping my eyes open. For a guy that loves watching movies and sees movies all the time in theaters, I never have a hard time keeping awake in a movie theater. But this is the second week in a row. The Mummy last week and Cars 3 this week that I had a hard time staying awake.
Yeah, that's pretty disappointing. So for my broad strokes, I wouldn't say that this is a bad movie. I feel like they did what they could with Talking Cars. Again, and I respect the fact that they did take it so seriously and they tried to tell a more adult story. So I respected the heavier themes and appreciated it. But all that being said, I was not invested at all. I wasn't engaged with the story. I wasn't engaged with the humor. I don't think I laughed once, and that's
no, I don't think I did either.
That's rare for me when watching a Pixar movie, because typically they slip stuff in that is actually pretty funny. At the end of the day, though, I understand also that this movie was not made for me. I am a 28-year-old man, and watching a movie about talking cars, I definitely felt a little awkward in the theater by myself. But the fact of the matter is, I have enjoyed almost every other Pixar movie, and that says something about the bar that I hold them to. So definitely disappointed, I would say.
Since you mentioned all the other Pixar movies, and obviously we're trying to keep it separate, but I'm just curious, do you like this better or Good Dinosaur? Because I think I would prefer this one to Good Dinosaur.
Yeah, I actually was running that through my head earlier today. I don't know.
Really?
Probably this. Good Dinosaur was really not good.
Yeah.
It was Bad Dinosaur.
I was waiting for it. I could see it in your eyes that you were contemplating whether or not you were going to say it. I was like, come on, let's just get it over with, man. So,
yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, you should. So let's just jump right into the story. So this being the third film in the franchise, it's kind of hard to talk about it without talking about the other two, but I think the third film in any franchise really kind of relies heavily on the past films to do some of the heavy lifting. I think as a screenwriter, you'd be silly to spend a ton of time with your main characters, like exposition wise. I mean, you still want to change the characters. You don't want to keep them the same one note, all three films, but I think you need to rely on the other films to do all of the heavy lifting, or at least most of the heavy lifting, as far as the main characters were concerned. Unfortunately, with this film, because the second one was so bad, it was almost like it put them in a weird position, because they didn't necessarily retcon with the story. I just felt like they kind of ignored what happened in the second film, which is good, because I fucking hate that movie. Like, I don't know if I keep beating that dead horse, but I don't know if I can beat it enough. Like, I really want to distance myself so much from that movie, even though I had no part in that movie whatsoever. But I hate that movie so much. I liked the fact that Mater takes a back seat in this movie. He's such a huge part of the second movie. And another reason why I hated that movie so much, because I really don't like the character. He's really, really one note. And I think he works somewhat in the first film because he's such a side character in the first film.
Yeah.
And then the second one, he is definitely a main attraction in that movie. And I get it because he is popular with the kids because kids are dumb and it's a dumb fucking character. So I really don't like him in the second movie, like I said, but I like the fact that he's almost forgotten in this movie. Really, I mean, he plays such a small role in this. Like I said, in broad strokes, if you've seen a sports movie ever, you've pretty much seen this movie. There's a lot of sports movie tropes in this movie. I will take it one step further. I feel like if you've seen any movie, you see that twist at the end coming because they plan it so hard. Yeah. But I can understand because it is kind of geared more towards kids than any other Pixar movie or any other Pixar franchise that they've had before. The Cars franchise definitely plays more to kids. So I feel like they almost have to be a little bit more heavy-handed with twists and stuff like that. But I mean, come on. Like the first time they mentioned this one thing that they mentioned, I was like, all right, so that's going to play a part later in the movie. And the twist is really, really heavy-handed. Like I said, Pixar has kind of made their name making adult stories with animated characters, and the Cars franchise is really not that. It's really kid friendly as the storytelling goes, and so that's the main reason why it's one of my least likable of the franchises. But I will give it credit as far as this movie's concerned. Cars 3 is the most mature of these stories. It's basically about getting old and how do you cope with that. So I think that's interesting, especially like I said earlier, I don't know how that's going to necessarily play with the kids, but it definitely played with me because I'm kind of getting to that point in my life. But so I did enjoy that aspect of it. I will say that the villain is kind of completely forgotten most of this story. I mean, it's certainly a Lightning McQueen story, but the villain plays such a big role in that. I could have seen more of him, and I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see more of the villain.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I appreciate what they did with the story, or at least what they tried to do, because as we've kind of said over and over again, the first two Cars movies, especially the second one, didn't really carry any weight, and we're not used to that in a Pixar film. So I really do appreciate that this movie brought some adult issues to the forefront, and that we're all scared of aging, and we're not going to be useful, or we're not going to be what we used to be. And like you, that is something that, you know, I'm starting to struggle with a little bit as somebody who's getting older. So I appreciate that those themes are in this movie, but at the end of the day, again, I can't really relate or sympathize with talking cars, and maybe that's just my burden to carry. But I know it may seem hypocritical because there are tons of far-fetched animated movies out there that I love and I can relate to, but I guess my line is drawn at automobiles because I just couldn't get 100% behind the story. I also, like I mentioned in broad strokes, couldn't get behind the humor either. I really am disappointed that it wasn't funnier. There was one line that made me smile. He says, "Life's a beach and then you drive." And and they kind of paused there for people to get it. And I thought that was okay, but that was probably the only time I emoted, which was disappointing because you're used to going into these Pixar movies and just, you know, being ready to laugh or cry or whatever. And this movie was just pretty bland. The story was not great.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just dive right into the performances, which in this case, we're really kind of just talking about the voice actors. I think that Owen Wilson does a fine job as Lightning McQueen. Yeah. We've talked about this before, especially with like TV shows. When you've done a few of them, you kind of get that character down. So I think that he does a fine job. The new addition to this franchise is Cristela Alonso. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not.
I'm not familiar with
Cruz Ramirez is the character's name. I thought that was a pretty cool addition because there's not a ton of female racers. I actually don't know if there's any female racers in this universe, so I thought that was pretty cool. I always like that Pixar does that where they have strong female characters in these movies because, like we said, even though most of the Pixar franchises are more adult stories, they are animated films, so they are geared a little bit more towards children. So I appreciate that they threw something like that in. I thought Armie Hammer did a good job as Jackson Storm, which is the most like villainy name that I think Pixar could come up with. I mean, but he's just not used very much in this movie. I kind of wish, like I said, in the story aspect, I kind of wish he was a little bit more utilized in this movie and developed a little bit more in this movie. I fucking hate Larry the Cable Guy, and I just can't compartmentalize that. Like every time I hear Mater, I see Larry the Cable Guy, and it just... I just cannot put that like I can't get past that.
100%. I'm right there with you with that.
I mean, he does Larry the Cable Guy fine. Like, that's who Mater is. And I guess that's what they were going for in the first film, which I don't want to say I appreciate, but I can understand at least that's what they were trying. And I mean, he nails it.
Yeah, he was also at the top of his popularity when that first movie came out, and that character took off. So I'm sure that's why they had him such a big part of Cars 2, but now
for sure.
He's kind of fallen off a little bit, and I think that's why he takes a back seat in this movie. So,
and because most people hated Cars 2, rightfully so.
I mean, this movie, performance-wise, was fine. I think like you said, the people that all come back, this is their third time doing it, not to mention the voice work they've done for these characters on like Disney Infinity and the side projects. So everybody knows their role, and they're fine. Nobody stood out to me as being just amazing. I agree with you. Armie Hammer was good as the villain. Wish he was utilized more, especially for his sake, because his star has fallen as well. So
for sure.
Turns in a pretty decent voice acting performance. Wish that it was more prominent, but I don't know. The newcomers were serviceables. There were 2 get-her-dones in the movie, and both times I cringed so hard I almost fell out of my chair because it's just, I can't do it. But I mean, everybody's fine. That's kind of all I have to say.
It was so weird because they kind of planted this thing where Jackson Storm can like get in your head or whatever. They kind of do it with Lightning McQueen early, and then they completely forget about it. Like, you'll go almost an hour without even seeing that character in this movie, which I get that it's Lightning McQueen's story, but then at the last race, he tries to get in. I don't want to spoil who he's talking to, but again, if you've seen any movie ever, you're going to figure it out. But he does it again, and they play it up like this is something that we should have be like terrified of, and it's like, oh yeah, we saw it one time an hour ago. And I just feel like if they developed that character a little bit more, I would have liked to see him and Lightning McQueen compete a little bit more. It was just like, oh, he beat me that one race, and then the next race he crashes, and then you don't see the character again for like an hour.
Yeah, I agree. It was the more they introduce him, and then the movie's all about Lightning getting past other stuff, and he's just kind of like this figment, but he was never really that menacing to me.
Yeah, he wasn't. I feel like they could have done a better job of making him that imposing force. Like, I get that it's more about Lightning again, but I feel like if you had a more opposing force, I think that middle part would have been more exciting for me.
Oh, for sure. All
right, so the next segment usually is just action, but there's not a ton of action in this movie. It's more about the animation, and it kind of feels silly. Like we've said with these animated movies, you're kind of talking about this technology that's come light years ahead since we were little kids. So, I mean, all these animated movies look beautiful. I will say that this franchise, like I said, with the storytelling is a little bit more kid-friendly. I think the animation also is a little bit more kid-friendly. And I know the merchandising with these films is really super, super popular. And that's another reason why they have pushed these films a little bit more than the other films. Yeah. It kind of seemed weird that this film got a sequel before Pixar was really doing sequels. So I will say that the animation does a little bit look more kid-friendly than we're used to. I will give them credit, though. Like, that crash sequence looked really fucking beautiful. It was almost like you were watching a movie.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. But For the most part, it's pretty much standard for what you would expect from Pixar.
Yeah, so I thought the animation was definitely really beautiful. There were scenes that, like you said, looked live action. There were also some scenes where they like show the reflections off of the vehicles that I thought was just spectacular as well. So you can say whatever you want about this movie, but at the end of the day, Pixar really puts a lot of care into their animation and still is top notch as far as these studios go. So it might not have been my favorite movie, but it was definitely beautiful looking.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So that's pretty much it for Cars 3. What's your star rating out of 5 stars?
I'm going to do 2.5.
Okay. I feel like we agree on this a lot more than I'd like to admit. But yeah, I'm also going to go 2.5. I really kind of had a hard time with this one because we've already set that standard of 3 stars being a recommendation. And I don't think that this film, I don't know. I almost want to say that I recommend it because it's definitely the best Cars movie so far, but I really don't like that franchise. So it's like that doesn't necessarily say too much about the movie, but ultimately the story problems and I just couldn't get over it.
Yep, I agree.
All right, so it's your week for nerd favorite. So what's this week?
All right, so I figured I would keep it in the Pixar realm.
Okay.
And the great thing when you go to see a Disney Pixar movie is that before it starts, you always get an animated short. So I want to know what your favorite animated short is, Pixar related.
Okay, I was going to say.
Yeah, Disney does theirs as well, but favorite Pixar animated short. So I'll go first and give you time to kind of get your thoughts together. So mine is Day and Night.
Okay.
And I want to say this was before WALL-E, but I could be wrong. It is basically, what's cool about it is this kind of a mixture of 2D and 3D animation. It's these two anamorphic characters, and within each one you see like day scenes going on, and then of course on the night side you see night scenes going on, and they kind of overlap and they're cautious of each other at first, but then they embrace that there are amazing things that happen during the night and there are amazing things that happen during the day. But what really makes it my favorite is it's just so creative. Like I wouldn't, like my simple mind could have never thought to put something like that cool together. So the thought and care that went into planning it and animating it and writing it is just, it boggles my mind. And it's one that I like to go back and watch. I have all of they put out the Pixar short film Blu-rays, and I've gone through and watched them all since. And that is definitely the one that sticks out to me as the most creative, although there is a lot of creativity involved with most of them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you. Day and Night is a good one. I was kind of nervous. I thought maybe you would take mine, but mine is pretty easy as well. It's one that I kind of fell in love with as soon as I saw it. I was like smiling the entire time. Is Lava, which was premiered before Inside Out a couple of years ago. And I think it's such a sweet little short. It's so, I mean, not necessarily simple because like you said with Day and Night, like you just can't think that how would anybody come up with this concept, and how would anybody come up with lava? Like that just seems so weird to me. I love the music in it. I actually have that song on my iPhone. It was my wife's ringtone for a really long time. I just really like that idea and that aesthetic of the Hawaii. Like my wife and I went to Maui for our honeymoon, and so we always kind of have a fond memories of that, and just that aesthetic is just really pleasing for me. So I just really kind of fell in love with this, and I've watched it a few times since, and I just love it every time I watch it. It's really, really good.
For what it's worth, I do want to correct myself. Day and Night was shown before Toy Story 3, not WALL-E. But yeah, Lava is also a good one as well, and that was one of the few that they did like original music for. So
yeah,
man, the Pixar's just top notch.
I will say before we kind of move on to our outro, I was a little bit irritated. So sitting in the theater by myself, I mean, there was just a ton of kids, and there was like a mom that was sitting like a few seats away from me, and I guess her mom was also there. And so we're watching the previews, and I mean, just like any film, like if it's a horror film, you're going to get a lot of horror previews, and animated films, I knew that I was going to get a lot of animated previews, which is fine because I like the genre. So we're watching it, and then the animated short, which I can't even think of the name, It was not good. I did not really like it that
Lou.
much. Lou, yeah,
Yeah.
So it's basically about this lost and found, and it's anti-bullying, which I can appreciate that concept. I just didn't really like the short film that much. But anyways, that's not the point of this story. So the mom turns to her mom and was like, 28 minutes for previews is fucking ridiculous. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, that wasn't a preview. You know that, right? You know the difference, right? So I was a little bit irritated, and then just...
Did she really say fucking ridiculous?
I don't think she said fucking ridiculous. I think I just said fucking ridiculous. No, I think that would have been pretty ridiculous if she had said that. But yeah, she was like bitching for like 30 seconds about it. I was like, are you kidding right now? Like, do you not understand that that's what happens before these movies? So I was a little bit irritated about that.
Maybe that's the first time she's ever seen a Disney animated movie in theaters, because they've done it for so long. Even the Disney animation studios have short films. Like, it's just, you just assume that going into this. So
yeah,
what a dumb bitch.
Yeah, it was pretty frustrating. I was like, so you already started me off like a little annoyed before the movie even started. So, all right. So that's episode 145 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. As always, we really appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can also check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerd You're Looking For. Check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream Monday at 9 p.m. Central. Of course, that's suspended for the next couple of weeks while he trains. I also will be doing a stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. I'll be streaming Stick of Truth for the next couple of weeks until I get that done, and then who knows what I'll be playing after that. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. Again, like we said last week, we are thinking about doing a new listener questions segment for our main topic in the future. So definitely start emailing us those questions. We'd appreciate it. And of course, you can vote for us for a podcast that month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are the Nerd You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.